Cool. Thank you. So our bi-weekly KW Commercial SoCal meeting. Happy to have to host Michael Scali over here. Michael, we were introduced by Ray Rodriguez, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes, and I think he should join us at some point as well to the call. Michael runs a big show for single tenant triple net, right, business over here. And then I'm gonna let you talk about yourself and show us what you guys are doing, and I'm gonna hear more. It's gonna be an interesting presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Manny, and thanks to all of you for taking the time to jump on the call today. So like Manny said, my name is Michael Scali. I'm a partner at a company called SAB Capital. We're based in Midtown Manhattan in New York City. We focus on single and multi-tenant net lease assets throughout the entire country. So we'll do deals from Maine all the way out to California. We transacted as a company in 34 different states last year. So when I mean Maine all the way out to California, we will literally do pretty much any state. So my role at the company is I run the 1031 department. So I work with principals who are moving out of management intensive assets, either in the 5 boroughs or in Southern California, and moving into triple net deals throughout the entire country. We initially started as a group at Marcus & Millichap in the New York City office back in 2009. It was a business model that we were able to execute on, but it was on a smaller scale. We had to do it within the Marcus & Millichap umbrella, working with Marcus agents in the city. Once we left SAB, it became a much more scalable business. So what I do a lot of is I work with brokers and consultants who are at other shops that do not specialize in triple net deals. So really, again, Manny, I appreciate you allowing me to jump on this call that you guys have on a bi-weekly basis. Really what I wanted to go ahead and do today was, just review the 1031 exchange. For some of you, it might be a bit elementary. For others, it's something you're probably very familiar with. Review the 1031 exchange, talk about our asset class, and talk about the process that we really work with, because my goal at the end of the day is to help you all win more business and provide you with some more value, because the 1031 exchange into triple nets out of multifamily is something that's being done on a very broad basis and a wide scale basis in New York and Southern California. So with that, I'll go ahead and I'll kick it off. Manny, would you mind letting me share my screen again?
I think you could just try to share it for a second.
Okay, let me see if I can get it. There we go.
There we go.
Awesome. So, really the first question that we've been asked a lot over the last year is the 1031 exchange going to be eliminated? Short answer, no, it's not going to be. But it was talked about after Biden was elected. In Biden's initial American Family Plan, he had discussed limiting the 1031 exchange significantly to only allow for $400,000 worth of deferrals. But the bottom line at the end of the day is that the 1031 exchange is not only a great benefit to the top 1% who take advantage of it, it creates 568,000 jobs a year. It creates $27.5 billion in labor income and over $55 billion in economic value. So while it sounds like a nice loophole and a nice platform to run on or discuss, the 1031 exchange has a lot of economic value besides the top 1% of the 1% taking advantage of it. So again, just a quick review of what the 1031 exchange is. The 1031 exchange is the purchase of a replacement property of equal or greater value of the property that you sold. So you sell a property for $10 million, you buy another property for $10 million to defer your capital gains taxes. You have to reinvest all of the proceeds. So going back to that $10 million scenario, you sell for $10 million, you deduct your expenses, you have to replace that amount. You can't just put $3 million in and then not do anything with the remaining $6 million. You have to replace that entire portion. You're going to have to obtain equal or greater financing. So in that $10 million sale, if you have $5 million of debt and you have $5 million in equity, you still have to replace that full $10 million, even if $5 million of it is debt. You have to replace it with a like-kind property, and a like-kind property is something that's held for investment or productive use. So you cannot sell a commercial building like a multifamily asset in Southern California and then buy a single family home in Phoenix, Arizona, or Austin, Texas, if you're moving there. Has to be held for investment purposes or productive use, if you're potentially going to be operating a business out of that physical location. So last but not least, in the exchange, you must use a qualified intermediary. You cannot take possession of your sale proceeds upon closing. If you, as the seller, take possession of your sale proceeds, you are immediately ineligible for a 1031 exchange. I can't tell you how many times, unfortunately, we've spoken with people and they've already closed, and I ask who's holding their money, and they mention that they are holding it themselves. The IRS does not allow for that. So definitely an unfortunate situation. So what does the timeline look like for a 1031 exchange? Again, as many of you are probably well aware of, once you sell your relinquished property, you have a total of 180 days to close on a new property to fulfill the 1031 exchange. The first 45 days are your identification period. So you have 45 days from the day you sell your property to pick up to 3 properties that you're going to identify and then close on 1 or 2 of them or 3 of them. So 45 days. You then have the extra 135 days to close on one of those 3 properties. Usually in our process, the tricky part is not closing in the 180 days. The tricky part is always identifying the property that you're going to buy. Because of a lot of our buyers are inexperienced or they're new to the asset class, sometimes it takes them a little bit longer to get a better understanding of the marketplace and thus pick a property that they want to hone in on. But we'll talk about our process in a second. But again, 45 days to identify, 135 days to then close after that, grand total of 180 days. So what is capital gains taxes, or what do capital gains taxes look like right now? They're pretty high. And obviously there's the potential for them to get higher in the coming years. But for you guys in California, you're looking at a 23.8% federal capital gain tax and then a 14.3% state capital gain tax. So you're roughly right around 39%, or excuse me, 38%, which is pretty substantial. If you factor in depreciation recapture after that, realistically, you're looking at a 45% capital gains tax, which is pretty substantial. So looking at, 2 different scenarios, my apologies. Scenario 1 on the left, a seller decides not to complete a 1031 exchange. They sell a building for $10 million. They incur $875,000 in expenses, a huge brokerage fee because you guys are fantastic brokers and are going to get nothing but high fees. So $875,000 in expenses. They have an adjusted basis of $2 million. Their taxable gain is $7.1 million. So realistically, at the end of this exchange, they're looking at only netting about $6.2 million or $6.3 million on a $10 million all sale or all cash sale. If you redeploy that into the money markets, into a very conservative note, you're really looking at only a 1% return. So you're talking about $62,000 to $63,000 a year in income in scenario 1. Scenario 2, you sell your property, you incur $875,000 in expenses, so you're left with about $9.1 million in change. If you were to go around and redeploy that capital into a triple net deal at an average cap of 5.8, which is our average cap rate right now, you're looking at a return of about $529,000. That's a $466,000 difference, and you didn't have to pay taxes. So in my mind, it really never makes sense to not complete a 1031 exchange. And we'll talk about some of the advantages that you can take advantage of in a second. But any questions before I continue to go on? I'd love for this to be a proactive session as opposed to a reactive one. So if anybody has any questions at any point, feel free to chime in. Awesome. So Besides deferring capital gains, which is obviously the biggest here, and moving into a completely management-free property, what are some of the other advantages that you should be taking advantage of in a 1031 exchange? Well, when people sell, a lot of times people want to take cash out. They want to liquidate their real estate holdings. They want to free up cash, maybe to put their kids through college. Maybe they're looking to relocate and buy a second home. Anyway, there's a need for cash. In this scenario, we always recommend that you still complete a 1031 exchange, because you can do something that's called a post-close refinance. And in a post-close refinance, what you'll do is you'll sell your multifamily asset in Los Angeles. Then maybe you buy a triple net leased CVS in Phoenix, Arizona. And after you complete your purchase of that CVS in Phoenix, Arizona, you can take out up to 65% of the equity in that deal via a mortgage, and that money is tax-free. So there's really no need to ever pay the taxes on a deal, because you're still able to pull that cash out up to 65% of it and redeploy it for whatever you want. Again, we've had people buy second homes or vacation homes with this. We even had a guy who one time wanted to buy a vintage car collection. I think it was like $1.5 million. You can do with this money whatever you want. So again, if you need cash and you want to sell, still do the exchange, but then still pull some cash out. Restarting or increasing depreciation is a huge component right now. Say what you will about our former president. He was very favorable and beneficial to landlords. And one of the big areas of this favoritism was in the depreciation component. So restarting or increasing depreciation can be absolutely huge. And there are two main things to take a look at. I talked about this with Ray and his group for probably 15 or 20 minutes. And the two components of depreciation to take advantage of are bonus depreciation and cost segregation. Bonus depreciation, cost segregation. Now, in cost segregation, what you're doing is you're essentially breaking up your building into different components and depreciating on an accelerated basis. So, let's just say I don't know wherever you guys are located right now, but I'm in a small conference room. Let's just say that, this is a commercial building and I'm operating a business out of this room. I'm looking around and I'm seeing what's in the room. Instead of depreciating everything off of a 39.5-year cycle, I'm going to depreciate my light fixtures over 10 years. I'm going to depreciate the doorknob over 11 years, or I'll depreciate the air conditioning over 8 years, the filters over 1.5 years. So I'm accelerating my depreciation and I'm increasing my net cash flow at the end of the day. So that's cost segregation. It's essentially breaking up your box. The next thing to take advantage of is bonus depreciation. And in bonus depreciation, you're allowed to use all of your depreciation in your first year or two of ownership. So with a lot of our clients, they may not pay taxes on their property their first year or two of owning it, because they decide they want to go ahead and fully depreciate that building. So, depreciation wise, absolutely a huge advantage, particularly if you're going to restart or increase it. Other big advantages of exchanging into triple net: diversification across the board, whether it's through different tenants or different geographical areas. One of the issues as brokers in California that you've been facing, that we're also facing here in New York, rising taxes, rent regulations, just issues that the governments are creating that are hurting the values of properties. So instead of being susceptible to this singular market, if you're looking at a 3 to 5 million or exchange north of $3 million, you can buy in separate markets. You can buy something locally in LA, and then maybe you buy something in Phoenix or in Austin or in Dallas or Atlanta, Georgia. You can diversify tenant wise as well. If we're working on a large exchange, we're highly encouraging our clients to buy across multiple sub asset classes. So maybe you buy one drugstore, and then maybe you buy one gas and convenience location or a dollar store. But really, at the end, the name of our game at the end of the day is stability and remaining conservative. And one of the ways that we do that is through diversification. We talked about a stepped up basis on the depreciation side. retirement planning. We talked about pulling cash out to purchase a second home. And I did mention to all of you earlier that you cannot do a 1031 exchange into, say, a single family home that you're going to occupy. But you can purchase a second home, or you can purchase a single family home. You just have to show intent to rent it out for a year. So, sometimes what our clients will do is they'll sell their multifamily asset. They'll buy a second home, maybe in Phoenix, or in South Florida, and they'll rent it out for a year, or they'll show intent to rent it out for a year. And after a year, they can then begin occupying the site. So that's something that we'll sometimes couple in regards to doing that along with a triple net property. So definitely that's something to mention. Any questions so far before I continue on? I'm regurgitating a lot of information to you guys today.
It's all good stuff for sure, Michael. I don't see anything on the chat yet.
Great. Okay. Sounds good. So we'll continue on. So, in regards to what's been going on in our marketplace over the last 2 years, it's been pretty significant, the cap rate compression that we've seen in our airspace since COVID began. Prior to COVID, triple net properties only accounted, or triple net sales only accounted for roughly 11% of all commercial real estate transactions. During the pandemic, that number spiked. We went as high as 23% of all commercial real estate sales during the pandemic. And that was due in large part to the stability of our asset class. Most of our tenants are Fortune 500 companies who are essential retailers or necessity-based retailers, have long-term leases, and you as a landlord have little to no management. So because of that uptick in demand, we've seen significant cap rate compression. So, for most of my career, our average cap rate has been in the low to mid sixes. We're now down to about a 5.8 as our average cap rate across the board. If I'm pitching triple net exchanges to my clients, I'm probably pitching them at a little bit of a lower cap rate. The more conservative deals are trading anywhere from a 4 to a 5% right now. We'll even see some restaurant deals in California that are trading in the mid to high threes. It's really all tenant and geographic or location dependent. So again, despite rising interest rates, and we have seen a spike over the last couple of weeks, we've seen our rates shoot up by about 25 to 50 basis points. Despite this spike, I think we're going to remain in a pretty low cap rate environment for the foreseeable future. So, anybody who expresses concerns about prices being at an all-time high right now, the market at the end of the day functions on supply and demand. So I don't see demand going anywhere anytime soon. So I don't see caps really moving too much on our end really anytime soon. So more pertinent to you guys, when do I pitch net lease and why do I pitch net lease? And really, how can we help you guys? So I think the greatest value that we can add to you as triple net brokers, to everybody who's working on the multifamily or the retail side locally in California, I think number one is when you have a client who doesn't want to transact because they're worried about what to do with their money after they sell. We can enter the fray and provide triple nets as that solution, as their tax solution. So, again, we can enter the fray as early on as an initial pitch. We also get involved quite frequently when an offer is brought to the table and the client is kind of, not taking the offer or really considering the offer and holding up what's holding up the transaction is the tax issue. So we can enter as early as the first pitch. We've gotten involved as late as day 43 in an identification period, but our goal at the end of the day is obviously to help the client and find a tax solution for them, but it's to help you guys drum up more business. So, I'd say our client, our profile of our client, or not our ideal client, but I'd say the most common profile is somebody who's probably north of the age of 50 or 55 years old. They've owned their asset for upwards of 1 or 2 decades, sometimes maybe even more, 3 or 4 or 5 decades. And they're just ready to move on from management. a management intensive asset. So that's really the client profile that I would be pitching to. And what I'm pitching is, maintaining cash flow, eliminating management. I think for a lot of people right now in the coastal markets of New York and California, I think a lot of it is getting away from these areas that are not landlord friendly and moving into states that are more landlord friendly. Again, whether that's in Arizona, a Texas, a Florida, North and South Carolina, Georgia, that's where we're doing a lot of our deals. I'm pitching them on no management. I'm pitching them on having a long-term lease in place, and I'm pitching on the tenants having strong corporate guarantees. So that's really what I'm highlighting to them. Some of the objections that we get or we hear, our referring brokers get is, I'm worried about my tenant leaving. I think an important thing to highlight is that there's a 92% renewal rate for corporate tenants on sites with expiring leases. But again, for the most part, we're focused on deals that have long-term leases. So again, our process, we can be introduced to the client as early on as you feel is appropriate. We do think pre-pitch will be advantageous to you most of the time in helping to create some extra motivation. But we really like to get working with the client as soon as 30 days before they're closing on their relinquished property. It's going to take a week or two to understand the market. It's going to take a week or two to get an accepted offer. And we'd like to close the replacement property as soon as possible after the down leg of the relinquished property closes. But that's basically it, guys. We'd love to be a resource for you. While I am based in New York City, as Ray is well aware of, I'm in Los Angeles. Usually, I'd say it's every 60 days or so. And if a need is more immediate and there's an absolute necessity to get in front of a client, I'm not afraid to hop on a plane and be out there within 24 to 48 hours. We've done it before. And we actually will be opening a Los Angeles office sometime during Q2 or Q3 of this year. So we will have a presence in Southern California in the coming weeks, which we're very excited about. But with that, I'll wrap it up. We're getting near that half an hour mark. I know my attention span really dwindles after 15 or 20 minutes. So again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to go ahead.
Good stuff, Michael. Thank you. That was awesome overview. Just bottom line to the point. Question on the chat from Elizabeth asking, how does the eviction moratorium affect the intent to rent prior to owner occupied status?
The what moratorium?
The eviction moratorium. I'm not sure if you guys are.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really have an effect on us. The eviction moratorium doesn't really have an effect on the exchange. It'll be more so an effect on the actual sale itself. So what effects has it had on us? We've had issues where the only real issues we've had with that is where there have been properties that were supposed to be delivered vacant, and you have tenants who are refusing to leave. So that's come up with us. But in terms of, the actual exchange itself, it hasn't been too much of an issue, or hasn't really been an issue at all once the client does actually decide to sell or is able to sell.
Yeah. Other question, guys, open platform. If you have any questions to Michael of any kind. And I'm not sure, Michael, if you can. Oh, David, go ahead.
Hi, Michael. This is David.
Hey, David.
Hi. I've been following the absolute triple net investments in other states and in California. One of the biggest objections that I've gotten is that most of those, they have long-term triple net leases that are 10, 15 years, and there is no absolute increase in rent. It's just, after 10 years or 15 years, 2% increase or 5% increase. That's one of the objections that I've gotten so far with the triple net.
Sure. So there are two asset classes that really have flat leases across the board in their lease structures. Those two asset classes are the drugstore space and then the dollar store space. Most of the other asset classes that we have our clients look at, whether it's fast food, gas and convenience, grocery, auto parts, those do have increases built into until the base term of their lease. So, it really all depends on the holding period and the holding plan for that particular client. We do have people who are parking cash right now and are only going to be holding for 5 years. So in that scenario, absolutely, I'm telling them to stay away from dollar stores and drugstores, because if they're going to be selling in 5 years, I want them to be selling off of a rent increase or a rent bump. However, if they're going to be a longer term holder, if they're going to be looking to hold for 15 or 20 years, or they're going to be looking to pass this down to their heirs, I'm okay with the flat lease because the pricing has been built in. Dollar stores and drugstores, they're going in, cap rates are going to be slightly higher right now than a lot of the other asset classes, just because of there not being increases. So it's going to be client to client, but there are asset classes that do offer increases. Usually those increases will be anywhere from 5 to 10% every 5 years, or in some scenarios, you might see 1.5 or 2% annual increases. But I'd say about 70% of our deals do have increases in the base term.
And one other thing that we've noticed is that the cap rates between the markets like Los Angeles and second markets, when you look, most of the offerings are within the third market, like the tertiary markets, like small cities and all that. And the cap rate difference between the tertiary and the big markets not that great. And most of the I've been specifically looking at the dollar stores, and it's just like they're in the middle of nowhere. And right now the market is great. The cap rate at 5.8 or 5.5, 5.2 is not that bad. But if the market turns, those cap rates are not going to be sufficient enough to really support the sale of the asset after so many years.
Sure. So in regards to, the markets that we're operating in, again, most of the markets are going to be core markets. We're not doing as many of those dollar stores in the middle of nowhere. You're seeing a lot of dollar stores out there right now because they're one of the few tenants that are expanding and are in rapid expansion mode. And really where a lot of those locations are, again, like you said, secondary to tertiary markets. Most of those deals we're not putting our clients into unless a client has a specific need for, a cap rate in the 5.5 to 6% range on a true triple net lease. And, they'll say, Michael, I don't care what happens in 15 years or 10 years, I'm not going to be here. Those are really the only times we do those types of deals. We're very real estate focused and very tenant focused. So, this is bondable real estate at the end of the day. It is bondable real estate by definition, but at the end of the day, you're still buying actual real estate. So we're big believers on strong real estate fundamentals. Usually we look for a minimum of 50,000 people in our 5-mile radius. We look for an average household income to be above $60,000. Those are kind of our markers and our barometers for smaller markets versus larger markets and impoverished areas versus non-impoverished areas. And again, most of the time, these assets are going to be very well positioned within a local market. So really the worst thing that you can have happen in our industry is having your tenant leave at the end of the lease term. We try to position our clients so that even if their tenant leaves in 15 or 20 years or 10 years, whatever their lease term is, they're still very well positioned to re-tenant. But, usually our clients don't hold for the entire lease term. Usually it's a scenario where, if you have a client who buys a 15-year lease, 7-Eleven in Florida, we're usually encouraging our clients 12 or 13 years from now, when they have 2 years of lease term left, to approach 7-Eleven and say, hey, you guys have been here for 12 years now. Would you consider signing a lease extension with us? And they might say, David, absolutely. We've been killing it here. If you flatten out our lease for the next 5 years, we'll sign a new 10-year extension with you. Or they might say to you, David, you know what? We've been struggling here. I don't know that we're going to be committed to this location. So, at that point, you have 2 or 3 years of lease term left. You put the property back on the market. You've hit 2 rent bumps. There will be a market for it. But, short answer, we're still very real estate focused at the end of the day. And you're going to see a lot of crappy deals on market because those are the types of deals that are getting to market. The best in class assets right now are trading off market.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, David. Other questions? Anybody, somebody? Michael, is that possible for you to share those slides with me afterwards? I'll share with the group.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to share. Be happy to email that to you. And then if you want to just forward that along, that way everybody would have my contact information. But
Of course.
I got one more question, Michael.
Yeah, absolutely.
What type of financing you usually find for this type of asset? Is that CMBS financing or is it conventional or?
So it's going to vary across the board. There's CMBS that's available. There's non-conduit lending. Working on a deal with a life co right now. Our max leverage for most of our deals, and I'd say kind of the standard max leverage for our industry is about 65%. With higher cap rate deals, that are closer to a 6 cap, I'd say 75 or 80% might be achievable, but because of debt coverage, you're going to have to be on a higher cap rate basis. But max 65% LTV, you'll have probably some component of recourse when you get up there. If you stay below 50% LTV, you'll probably, and you have decent credit behind the guarantee on the lease, you'll probably be looking at 100% non-recourse. So very favorable financing terms, even for locations that may not be A+ on the real estate side.
Okay. Other questions? Anybody? Michael, Scali, thank you so much for your time. That was an awesome presentation. Looking forward to share that content with our group later today.
Absolutely, guys. I appreciate it. It was nice meeting everybody, and thank you. Thank you for your time. Thanks, Manny.
And you're welcome to stay on the call if you wish.
I'm gonna hop off. I've had a pretty crazy day, and it continues. So
you're East Coast time as well, right?
Yeah. So I've got a couple more hours, and I gotta head out.
Got it, Michael. Thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Cool. So let's just open up